keeping students and staff safe in school. It's become a major topic lately in the Omaha Public School District. A big part of that is how to discipline students who commit acts of violence during school and on school grounds.
WWT 6 News producer Roger Hamer was at the school board meeting as members consider what changes need to be made.
Recent violence in some Omaha Public Schools has got the attention of the district school board, so much so that they're making some changes in the students' code of conduct to help stop this disturbing trend.
On March 1st, ammunition was found at Benson High School. A few months earlier, a 15-year-old student was stabbed just behind the school. In January, 4 Northwest High students were detained at gunpoint when it was alleged one of them may have brought a gun to school. It's a problem that the Omaha Public School Board is trying to get under control. As a result, the board is looking to make discipline changes to the student code of conduct. A major emphasis, violence against staff. The district will consider if a student who assaults a staff member should be transferred or expelled, even if it's a first offense. Another proposed change, if a student's developmental level should be a factor in deciding how that student is disciplined.
This language does not add additional violations or resolutions to this code. It is intended to speak to the critical importance of our teachers and staff in our schools, as well as our desire as a district to support those individuals. Intentional violence against staff is demoralizing and damaging to school culture and school mission.
Some board members had problems with language and legal concern.
I saw on page 8 it talked about deadly weapon. That was added in red. So can you explain to us what is considered deadly versus dangerous? I saw on another page.
I use a pencil as a great example, right? You probably could cause death with a pencil, but I would say generally speaking that's not what the law is referring to. We're talking about a blade that is of a certain length, not a short pocket knife or anything like that.
Board member Nancy Kratke disagreed.
A pocket knife is dangerous and it's deadly, and that was what was referred, a pocket knife, and the length of it doesn't have to be very long to be deadly.
And that's what the statute defines as deadly, so it has to be
better
over
look
a
at the
certain
statute
length.
because this is not accurate. My personal experience
Understood.
tells me.
Understood.
The clock is ticking. The board wants to settle the concerns before the end of the school year. On your side, Roger Hamer, WWT 6 News.
Another consideration for the board to allow parents of a student who's being disciplined to view any existing video of the incident.